Hi everyone, I'm Simran Arora and welcome to my blog, A Room of One's Own. Here I have Martin Waxman with me today. He's a social media strategist, a professor of social media at my college, Seneca, and other colleges as well. He's also a LinkedIn Learning professor online and an AI researcher. We're here with him today to speak about the creative process behind social media strategy and how social media is a liberating space for creative expression. So, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Simran. And thanks for asking me on your blog.
Thank you. Um, just before we begin, I want my readers to know a little bit more about what you do as a social media strategist.
Yeah, well, my background is really traditional PR agencies. So I worked for the Toronto office of a large global multinational. I also started a number of agencies of my own. And, when I was doing communications, it was really more focused on media relations and events. And then social media came in and I got really interested in that, and especially interested in the idea of blogging because I thought, wow, all of a sudden, PR and communications has a voice. Whereas before we were always in the shadows. And I like the idea of having a voice. I think it's more transparent. It builds relationships, trust. So that's something that always appealed to me. And I started just reading about it, reading blog posts, learning about it, trying things out, trying to blog myself, and getting interested in social media. Now, my challenge was that my clients who were hiring us to do one thing, and I was trying to get them to do something else, and they had other agencies doing it, or maybe they were global clients, so they were doing it out of the US, for example, social media. So it was really hard to move them in that direction. So that's when I decided to kind of switch paths and become more of a social and digital communication strategist. And along that way, I kind of fell into teaching, which is what I do now. So it's an interesting transition. It shows you that in your career, you may be doing one thing. You always need to be open, learning new things, and adaptable to trying something else. And the path is not straight, it's kind of really windy.
That's true indeed. You've been in the social media industry for so long, and even communications, as a matter of fact, it started from PR and communications. Do you think social media being a more measurable field than PR and communications makes a huge difference?
Um, I actually think PR is measurable. I just don't think that most practitioners, are measuring it properly. And it's something we talked about in class, the whole notion of just looking at impressions or these big numbers rather than looking at behavioral outcomes. What do we want audiences to do, or what do we want the organization to achieve, and figuring out how to measure that. Now, you could do that through research, like through surveys, formative surveys that you started a campaign to see what the awareness level was of a certain issue or topic or message, and then do your communications and then measure it again. That's very expensive to do. And what social media has done, and really digital communications, is it's given us an opportunity to tie what we are doing from a communications and relationship building perspective to actions that we can measure on digital channels. And here, for anyone interested, go to spinsucks.com, and read about measurement using the PESO model: paid, earned, shared, and owned media. And there are so many posts there on how we can actually move a step beyond impressions, for example, to measure those outcomes and do it effectively, and then position us as more valuable to organizations.
Indeed. I'm talking about measurement and the new tools to measure the social media activities every day. Besides those, there are new features being introduced on social media almost every day. Like recently, Instagram just rolled out the Reel feature, right?
Yes,
Um, how do you
which
keep
isn't
up?
available here yet. Well,
Yeah, it is not available. It is just for creators, I think, for now.
yeah, and they're testing it, I think, in Brazil and somewhere in Europe
And even in India.
and India.
It's,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, right, because TikTok was banned in India. That's one of the
exactly. Best timing.
yeah. So Reels is Instagram's version of TikTok, sharing short
Yes.
videos that you can edit and have a lot of fun with. It's hard to keep up because there is something new every day. I subscribe to newsletters and different sites. So TechCrunch is one, Adweek is another, Recode is another, NextWeb, MIT Technology Review, New York Times Technology section. I mean, there's so many different things to read, and you can't read them all, but you have to kind of pick and choose. And when you do that, you start to see certain patterns emerging, like what people are talking about. The fact that Instagram's testing Reels, you see that written about or in headlines on different sites. Then you pick one to read about it, or maybe pick another. And then once something's launched, you want to try it out to know how it works. So it's not only enough to read about it, you have to test it and see how it works. And that gives you a bit of experience so that you can actually say to your organization, hey, here's this new feature. Here's how it works. Here's what we've done. We've done a little experiment with it. And you want to make sure that it's okay to do that experiment. You don't necessarily just do it. We're going to try something. And here's what we think we can achieve. Let's try something bigger. And that's where creativity comes in, how can you build on this if the results show that it's worth building on it.
Absolutely. That's a very interesting way of putting it, that you actually tried yourself and then you can use that experience to recommend clients how to experiment with different tools that are available to just deliver the new brand messages.
Yeah. And that means you need to participate, be active, constantly learn new things and try new things, and not feel like, okay, I know how to do my job. That's it. You have to be open to doing it different ways. And this is where analytics come in, looking at how what you're doing is affecting the organization's goals, whether or not it's working. And if it's not working, how do you adapt? And if it is working, how can you maybe make it bigger or build on it?
Yeah, something like social media is changing every day. It's
Yeah.
like you have to adapt to the new changes every day. If you consider the scenario of the social media landscape, after COVID-19, I think there's been an increase in the accountability. Like the customers now seek accountability from the brands. They want answers to their questions. They're on the always active. There is a new emphasis on customer relationship management. Can you explore a little more on that, like that topic, about how more than ever now, customers are seeking answers on social media, and there is an increasing need to be active and to engage and to listen to what the customers are saying.
Oh yeah, no, that's a great point. And really, part of it is this digital transformation. When we have to, social distance or quarantine ourselves during COVID, and we have to have more interactions online. So, for example, here we are on Zoom, whereas if we were, in class, you might have done this in person, this interview, rather than on Zoom. So I think the adoption of digital technologies, e-commerce, people buying things and interacting with organizations and brands and their friends and family too, but more online has really accelerated because of COVID-19 and because of the constraints. Now, when all this is done and we're back to the world that we knew, hopefully that will come soon, but we have to take it in steps and it's slow. It'll be really interesting to see whether or not some of the digital transformation sticks. I think a bunch of it will, because again, just knowing that we can have an interaction, a video interaction on Zoom and not have to travel somewhere. Well, that saves time. It also saves maybe travel time. If you're two people are in different places, you don't get the benefit of the face-to-face, but for some interactions, maybe that's okay. And so, the value of face-to-face gets even higher. So those are things. And I think organizations need to understand that, know that it's not just going to switch off and go back to the way it was. Figure out, okay, how can they listen to their customers? What are their customers talking about? How can they, amp up their monitoring game, social media monitoring or social listening, and adapt to that so that they're able to serve customers on digital platforms as effectively as maybe they have, in person or in traditional ways.
Right. And I also feel that in regards to the current political climate across the world, there is an additional focus on having a political voice as well. Being apolitical is not something that a lot of people that engage with the brand appreciate anymore.
No, people, and there's research from the Annenberg School of Communications, just their recent report. I don't have it in front of me, so I don't know the exact numbers. But if you look on the importance of brand activism, certainly to millennials and Gen Z or Gen Z consumers or people, brand values, brand activism, brands taking a stand is important. And we see that right now in the boycott that's going on Facebook and Instagram, and how so many big brands like the Canadian banks, like Unilever, like Coke, like Ford, they're boycotting advertising on Facebook and in some cases on social media in general, because they don't like the polarization, the disinformation, the racist comments that are there and kind of amplified because of, algorithmic amplification. And hopefully that will have an effect on getting back to more civility and more civilized conversations.
That's true. That's true. In fact, millennials, I think, are engaging with social media the most, and they use it as a platform to show their talent, build an audience, and even leverage their influential voice to make an impact. At the
Yeah.
same time, there is a negative side to it of trolling and cancel culture. What do you think about that?
I, I'm not a fan of trolling, and honestly, I'm not a fan of cancel culture in general. I mean, there's certain specifics. I think if the discussion comes from an informed place and you have a debate or a discussion and two people can disagree, but if they're not shouting, if the discussion is reasoned, hopefully they can get a better understanding. I mean, we're all entitled to our own opinions and thoughts and ideas, but you don't want to shout people down. And you don't want to say, okay, you know, you're different. You're not from here, or your ideas are different than mine, or you look differently than me. Any of these things like that really should have nothing to do with it. And so those are conversations that really need to be monitored, whereas open, constructive discussions, I think, are a positive thing. So if you just, and it's a fine balance between free speech and between, conversations that are harass people. And I think that's where hopefully our better natures and our morality and our values come into play, and we're just more respectful of one another and can have those kinds of dialogues. But if all we do is close things off, then the world becomes more polarized, and our biases, our confirmation bias, what we already believe, comes into play, and people get farther and farther apart depending on your ideologies and your beliefs. And really you want to bring people together to establish some sort of decent common ground. I know that sounds idealistic, but
Yeah, but that's true because I think more than any other media channel, social media is one place that gives you most amount of freedom to express yourself. And unlike popular opinion, I think social media is extremely creative as a field, as a platform in general. What is the most creative thing about the work that you do? What do you enjoy the most, personally?
I still like writing the most, and because I have a writing background, so I really like writing a post. And then, through LinkedIn Learning, I'm doing a digital marketing trends course. And so what I like about that is I'm researching, writing, figuring out what the trends are, and then putting it together. And then I get a chance to record it. So I'm not only writing about it, but I also get a chance to talk about it. And then hopefully people get to interact with it and comment on it and say, wow, that was great, or I don't like that, or I disagree. It doesn't matter. It's the dialogue that's there. And that's fantastic when you see that engagement. So it's a combination of creativity and being social. And I do agree with you. Social media is a great place for a lot of creativity. But it's also a place where you find a lot of trolls. And that's why it's important to know that just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And if you're angry about something, just wait a second before you post, because maybe you can express it in a way that explains your position, but doesn't, anger or inflame the issue on the other side and just turn into a shouting match.
Absolutely. Um, I would also like to ask you, how do you think things are going to change in the digital media landscape in the future, considering one, everything's online, and second, through the perspective of AI, artificial intelligence? You also specialize in the research of that. So, how do you think that is taking over the world now?
Well, we're in for the thing is about AI is not coming, it's here. It's part of so many things we do, and it's only going to become a bigger part. So things like natural language generation, where you say, have a prompt or a sentence, and the AI writes a post or some text around that, or creates a subject line for an email. That's getting better and better and better. An organization, a research organization, OpenAI, which was not for profit, now is owned by a for-profit company, but they're doing all this research. Their GPT-2 natural language processing or natural language generation model, processing model, is really getting better at coming up with synthetic media. So the question is, it can be used for good, it can be used for evil. And the thing is, it's good, but it's still not perfect. And people can take it and sort of add more creativity to it. That's what's exciting. There's something else called ambient AI. And that is really a good example of that is augmented reality. When you hold up your phone and you see kind of different things. So in Google Maps, before COVID, I was away in Scotland. We had to find something, and I searched for directions. I typed it on my phone, and I held up the camera part in Google Maps, and I saw directions. So like arrows on my phone that pointed me in the direction. And that's quite exciting. We're going to see more of that. So more AI, AR, augmented reality experiences on the world. And then ambient AI, that's an example of that. Voice search is an example of that. You ask a question, you get an answer right away, whether it's a visual answer or a text answer or a combination of that. We'll see more integration with screens, and it's just operating in the background. So it's just there, and it's going to affect how we discover things. Kathy Hackl, Hackl, is a futurist. She's written some really interesting posts on what she calls B to R to C. So that's business to robot to consumer. In other words, marketers will have to figure out how to market to AI agents as intermediaries in order to reach consumers. And so that's all pretty exciting, but there's so many issues around that too. And we have to consider those too. Privacy issues, issues of bias in terms of the answers that you're presented with, or the bias that's built into algorithms or the data sets that are being used to train the algorithms. So all of this is exciting, but it's also challenging, and there are many risks. And so it means, again, that we need to keep our eyes and minds open and keep learning.
That's very interesting, and that's actually very true. Um, One very important, and I think and I think it can be the concluding question, is how do you think AI can affect creativity in social media?
I think AI is a really great idea generator right now, because
Okay.
again, as natural language processing or natural language understanding, where it understands what we say, it can see patterns in data. So it can come up with really interesting and maybe off the wall ideas. in for creativity. But again, we need to sift through that and figure out, okay, this is just too bizarre or too gruesome or too weird. And how do we kind of take those and maybe expand the way we look at it? And hopefully there will be a positive AI human collaboration.
Okay. Can you explain how? Maybe give an example.
Um, well, using natural in a brainstorm session, you have an AI agent that's part of it. And so while people are throwing out ideas, the AI is also generating, hundreds and hundreds of ideas too. And through that, maybe even seeing, like people are generating different ideas, the AI is taking a different tack on them. And then you go away and you look at it and go, here's a different way of thinking about this. How can we create a piece of content around that? Still so new. There's a great book, if you want to read it, called AI Weirdness by Janelle Shane. That's the blog. The book is You Look Like a Thing and I Love You by Janelle Shane. She's the author of the AI Weirdness blog. And what she does is she looks really at the creativity that can come out of working with AI when you ask it kind of bizarre questions, like ask an AI to come up with different types of ice cream flavors, and also the limitations around that. And it gives you a sense of where we're going and, again, some of the challenges.
Right. It's very interesting because if you even think about how meetings take place, you can actually use AI to do the research or social media listening and monitoring,
Hmm.
and you could use that data to think of new ideas and how to produce content for brands. And through an individual perspective, you can use AI to kind of understand um, the feedback of the readers or your audience in general and understand what kind of content to put forth.
Yes, that's right. But a human's still needed because, again, sentiment analysis is getting better, but we still, it still isn't great with humor, with sarcasm, and with certain kinds of, topics. So,
Yeah,
hopefully there is a future for human and AI to work collaboratively, human led though. I still want it to be human led.
I agree. I think the value of sentiments is not going to get diminished. I think it's going to get stronger, considering that everybody's stuck at home and they want that personal touch. So I think
Yeah.
that AI and humans have to collaborate to make this world more creative and social media a more liberating space to be in.
Yeah.
With that thought, I would like to thank you for being here and sharing your opinion and thoughts and experience with us today. Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
taking out your time.
Thank you for asking me and great talking to you.
Thank you.